بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وبارك وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Hoping that we've had some more time to reflect on the question about how we would feel if the Imam of the time was to reveal himself. I know there was a little discussion with 2 or 3 of the people present, but most of us will have had some time to reflect on that. So આપણે ગઈકાલે જે વાત કરતા હતા સવાલ આપણે કર્યો કે જે ઇમામ-ઉઝ-ઝમાન છે ઈનું ઝુહુર થાય તો આપણે શું કરીએ અને આપણે એને કેવી રીતના આપણે એને મળીએ કે એના સાથે કેવી રીતના વાત કરીએ કે આ સવાલ આપણે નોર્મલી આપણે કરતા નથી હોતા. એ તો ઇમામ આવશે તો એ પોતે કહેશે કે હું ઇમામ છું. But like a question was raised કે how would we know that he is the imam? Inshallah એમાં અલ્લાહની કઈ મસલહત હશે તો આપણે સમજ પડી જશે કે આ ઇમામ ઝુહુર થયું છે. અને આ સવાલ આપણે નોર્મલી આપણી કમ્યુનિટી ચાલે છે because we have the દાવત હાદિયા જે હમણાં આપણા સાથે છે તો પછી ઇમામનો મર્તબો થોડોક આમ એમ તો ના કહેવાય કે કમ પડી જાય પણ આપણે એમ કે વિચાર ના કરીએ. ઘણી ફેરી કહીને ઇંગ્લિશમાં નથી કહેતા કે આઉટ ઓફ માઇન્ડ આઉટ ઓફ સાઇટ ઓર આઉટ ઓફ સાઇટ આઉટ ઓફ માઇન્ડ જેવું વિચાર ના કરવાનો હોય તો પછી આપણે ભૂલી જઈએ કે ઇમામ છે પણ ખરા. But it is important to discuss this. It's a conversation. અને આ બહુ જરૂરી છે કે આ બાબતમાં વાત કરવી ઘટે બીકોઝ ઘણા બધા સવાલ એમાંથી નીકળે જવાબે નીકળે અને એમાં કોઈ અત્યારના હિસાબે ન બધું કોઈ સાચું અને ખોટાનો સવાલ નથી. તમે કોઈ સવાલ આપણે કરીએ તો it doesn't mean to say કે સવાલ ખોટો છે કે જવાબ ખોટો છે કે જવાબ સાચો છે. You know what I mean? Because in the present circumstances, there is no right and wrong answer. But that doesn't mean to say the conversation should not be had. The conversation should be had. In the same way as sometimes difficult conversations, not necessarily linked with imamat, but koi pan sawal hoy, mazhabi sawal hoy, koi apni zindagi, apni life na andar koi evo sawal hoy, so we have some, that's what I feel, I could be totally wrong, but most of us tend to put it to one side or brush it under the carpet કે હવે આ બહુ અઘરો સવાલ છે આને ના કરવો જોઈએ કે આને મૂકી દે આના પર વધારે ડિસ્કસ ના કરીએ. But I don't think that's a very good moving forward because ઘણી ફેરી સવાલ છે શું થાય કે કન્વર્ઝેશન આવે વાટાઘાટ થાય તો એના અંદરથી પછી સોલ્યુશન નીકળે છે ને. So it is that conversation which will open our hearts and reveal truths and answers. અને એ તો કોઈ પણ બાબતના અંદર હોય કોઈ અને we shouldn't be what's the word I'm going to use here is we shouldn't be we should not keep ourselves from asking the questions because of what somebody else might feel about it. The important thing is to ask the question if it has come in your heart and then in your mind, then that question should be asked and one mustn't feel you are going to be judged on that. Oh, that shouldn't come into it, because everybody is at different levels of understanding, and if everybody's understanding is not necessarily at the same level. Uh, Therefore, uh, it's very important to ask a question to get an answer or get a guidance from there. Um, so having said all that, then we moved on to uh, we briefly considered the Rasail Ikhwanus Safa. And we mentioned that there are 52 epistles. In an epistle is a letter or a message. It could be very short, it could be very long. Some of the Rasails are very long, they, and they cover all kinds of topics in different sciences, both in the physical world and the spiritual world. Uh, the word science I'm using here does not necessarily mean the normal science you would, it does incorporate that as well. But when I say a science, because the word science is a broad word, uh, and it's to do with when you investigate, when you study, when you, that's where the word I'm using it on the, in that context. That the Rasail, if you look at the list of the 52 Rasails, you'll be quite amazed to know it covers like arithmetic, mathematics, geometry, disciplines that we normally only associate with schools nowadays. Um, and this is where it becomes quite different, that the sciences that they used to study back in the day was always from a holistic life, a complete life, rather than uh, he's a chemist or he's a doctor, or we tend to compartmentalize ourselves, and then our thought processes are only focused on those one or two items. But the people who were studying back in the day, like for example, the people who compiled the Rasail, uh, they used to look at it from a holistic point of view, that it became part of their life. Because it also says for the Rasail as well, um, that the Rasail would enable us to have a more balanced outlook on life, in their holistic down to our relationship with animals and their rights, and ultimately to our creator Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because it all leads to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he is the creator of the whole of the universe. We understand that, we acknowledge that as well. But sometimes in our practice, we don't tend to consider that. And I will recommend again that the 52nd, the 22nd epistle should be read by everybody and should be considered by everybody. It is extremely important. It's a very good conversation between the animals and the human being, in front of the king of jinn. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Anyway, inshallah, we will try to get hold of it and try to pass it on to people, or get them to see how they can obtain this particular epistle. Then we moved on to the beginnings of the Fatimid Caliphate, appearance of the Imam al-Mahdi in Sijil Masa, which is, as we said, in Morocco. Now, the beginning, after Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, Imam Qaim, etc., etc. If you know your takarrub, then you will know the lineage. And they moved from one part to the other of an area in those days called Ifriqiya. And this Ifriqiya of the back in the day is Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Spanish Sahara. And their presence in all these places is still visible today. For example, there is a port called Mahdiya, named after Imam al-Mahdi. It's a seaport. It's a very pretty place. And it was strategically chosen by the Imams because it is right on the sea, and they could then make it as a port. And because of that port, the Imams, the Fatimid Caliphate had one of the best navies of that time. Because there was shipbuilding going on there, and they could protect their territories very well from that vantage point. Then there is another town called Mansouriya, which, as you will know, the name says it, is named after Imam al-Mansur. And this town is near present-day Kairouan in Tunisia. And also in Mansouriya, after Imam al-Mansur, we have Imam al-Moiz Ledinillah, who was also present there until he moved the caliphate to Al-Qahira in 969. So 909, Imam al-Mahdi reveals himself, and in 969, they move away from that portion of Africa to further down to Egypt, what is now known as Egypt. And they built a new city, and they called it Al-Qahira. Qahira means the victorious. And it is now known as, you know very well, Cairo. So they've kept that name, which is, there it is, that is also, that tells you that is quite a significant development that had taken place there. So this is a new city built. And from here, the Fatimid Empire, the Fatimid rule expands to many, many parts of the world. It is mentioned that they went all the way to Sicily as well, what we now know as Sicily. And the historical aspect of this is very interesting, that the Imams were in control for the next 250 years. So the Fatimid Caliphate lasted for 250 years from its beginnings. And it is marked with remarkable progress in all spheres of life, notwithstanding one of the oldest learning establishment, the Jamia Al-Azhar. Al-Azhar University is still there in Cairo, and it is named after their ancestral mother, Fatimatu-Zahra, Salamullah alayhi. Zahra, as you know, means brightness and brilliance. So they were very, very focused on keeping their lineage. So we have the caliphate is named after Molatena Fatima, Fatimid Caliphate. And then the Al-Azhar University is named after her laqab, which is Fatima Zahra, yeah? Which, if you put it together, it joins together that they are from the progeny of the Ahlul Bayt. That's what they are trying to establish here. So I just want to talk a little bit about Al-Azhar University. It is still running. although it is only running as a high-level madrasa now, but back then it used to be a multidisciplinary place of education and deliberation, both for men and women. Okay? A true university as we understand the word today. Because when you go to when we go to university, for example, in this country, it is multidisciplinary. You can't only just go. You yourself might go for one subject, but there are students of all different types of subjects. They undertake all different types of subjects there, and that's why it's called a university. Universe. Uh, that's where the word comes from. So anyway, and I believe that women recently started being admitted once again to the Al-Azhar, to the Jamia Al-Azhar. Some current news on Al-Azhar, just because if you ever go to Cairo, it is worth visiting. So it has recently been refurbished with consultation and financing by the Qatar, as are the mosque of Al-Akmar and the mosque of Al-Hakim and Moiz Lidinillah Street, which is all there in Cairo even today. It has just been revived, which is a wonderful thing. And some years back, the late Aga Khan established the Azhar Park, an area of green refuge amidst the hustle and bustle of the modern day Cairo, because Cairo is an extremely large city, very, very busy. And then in this area where this Hakim Mosque, Al Akmar Mosque, where you find them, where the Al Azhar University, the madrasa is, if you want to, and also, we have the Hussainiya there as well. Imam Hussain આપણા ઓલી વાક્ય છે ને કે મૌલાના હુસૈનનું સર હતું તો it came to Cairo and it is marked by this Hussainiya mosque there. It's known as Al Hussein, very famous place. You tell any taxi driver in Cairo, take me to Al Hussein, no problem. They'll take you straight away there. So all this complex is still there. Wonderful that the lineage is still kept alive there. So we also considered yesterday as well that the Imam who is going to reveal himself uh, uh, at some stage is not just our Imam. He is going to be the Imam for mankind. And we consider the question of why is he not come, why is he not revealing himself after 900 years since Imam Tayyib alayhi salam went into concealment. And it is a consideration, it is a discussion that probably because the humanity itself is not ready for the zuhur of the Imam, because there are so many things which at the moment are quite wrong. There's so much injustice and all the politics that is going on at the moment. So the consideration here is the Imams of the Fatimid Caliphate were also caliphs. They were Imams, but they were also caliphs. So there have been situations where, for example, there have only been Imams. For example, if you look at Imam Hassan or Imam Hussein, Imam Zainul Abidin, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, or Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, all these Imams were just Imams. And you could say that they were only Imams for the Shia fraternity. Khali Shia na Imams hata. And they were not caliphs, so they were not rulers of the Muslim empire. But with the Fatimid Caliphate, they were imams as well as caliphs. So when they were caliphs, then a certain other aspect comes into play. And they were very regal, they were very royal. So they built palaces because they are going to get people coming from all different countries, all different religions to pay their homage uh, uh, and all the things that goes on in that kind of environment. Like, for example, today we have got the political parties who are in control of the government. And back in the day, it used to be the queen or the king of the country who was in. But the, that is the royalty I'm talking about. So there were a lot of palaces were built, and all the facilities that go with that royal structure, if you want to call it, or setup. Um, Simply because it becomes a political situation as well. A little bit of a not so much a digression, but okay. So we have Imam Caliphs, and they go down all the way down to the end of the Fatimid Caliphate, right up to Imam Tayyib alayhi salam, when he went into concealment. But he went into concealment in Yemen because obviously the political situation in Egypt changed quite drastically. Their lives were in danger, so they made a move. And I think a while back there was a majlis which was conducted by Hamid Bhai, where he discussed about Hurratul Malika as a hujjah of the Imam, and that kind of forms that kind of is the end of the Imam, the caliphate. The Imams continue in the progeny of Imam Tayyib, but the caliphate comes to an end. Question for you: do you know, or does somebody know, what is the cloth that drapes the Kaaba called? Anybody? When if those who have visited the Kaaba know that there is a black cloth with interlaced with gold writings, etc. What is that cloth called?
The kiswa.
Okay, right. So that kiswa during the caliphate, the Fatimid Caliphate, for 250 plus years, was every year changed by the Imams. They used to send that cloth to the Kaaba because they were in control of the Hijaz area. Hijaz is Makkah, Medina, and Taif. These three places in Saudi Arabia is known as the Hijaz area. And the Hijaz was under the control of the Fatimid Caliphate. And therefore, their responsibility to change that cloth. And every year, like it is done even today, but not by because there's it is done by the Saudi Arabian government. But back in the day, during the Fatimid Caliphate, every year, that cloth used to be changed, sent over from Egypt all the way to Mecca, and then draped the Kaaba with it. And as you know, it's a very expensive item. This is not a cheap item because it is actually sewn with gold thread. And a few years ago, there was a documentary about the making of this in one of the Saudi Arabian places. I can't remember all the details, but there was a documentary about it. But it's just a point of information. It just shows that they were imams and they were caliphs, and And also, there was a period during the Fatimid Caliphate when there was a famine in Saudi Arabia. And in that period, the Hujjaj, whoever went to Hajj, they were all fed by food that had been taken from Egypt to feed all the Hujjaj, uh, which which shows how much responsibility they took and how serious they were about making sure that their people were all okay. You know, there was care, there was empathy, there was action. And this legacy is quite important because not a lot of empires have done this kind of work. Not only did they expand in their education, they looked at all aspects of their life. They considered so many things. Uh, I want to read something, which is again a series which I want to share with you. It is Wish I Was There. So this is a story about riding forth to open the canal, and the person present there is Nasir Khosrau. Now, those who don't know, Nasir Khosrau is a da'i of that period of imamate. He's from Khorasan in Persia, what is currently, you could loosely called Iran. But at that time, it was a Persian empire, which was very, very large. Um, and Nasir Khosrau is born in Persia, but he's very famous. Probably Apra Lokama Tamekada Sambairose, Safar Nama. Some people would have heard about this. Safarnama is a travel log, which is written by Nasir Khosrau. And very interesting, his journey from his Khorasan all the way to um, um, Makkah, Medina, and takes him 7 years of traveling before he comes to in the presence of the then Imam in Egypt. It took him that long to come there because there were no aeroplanes, yeah, or no motor cars or thing. It was traveling either by camel or horse or even walking. But the Safarnama he has written is again one document, one book is available, and uh, you see a lot of description of so many things, which is wonderful, really. Okay, so I'm going to read this. I wish I had been in Cairo, Egypt in 1048 to witness the opening of the canal ceremony, an annual breaking of the earthen dike holding back the Nile, letting the pent-up river gush through the main royal canal and then rush off into hundreds of small channels throughout the countryside, drenching the thirsty earth with life-giving, nutrient-rich, silt-laden flood water. And I wish my guide for the day had been the poet from the eastern Persia, Nasir Khosrau, whose travel memoirs, the Safarnama, have left us with some of the richest descriptions of the ceremony, one of the biggest holidays of the year. My guide Nasir explains that the importance of the ceremony is linked to Egypt's absolute dependence on the flooding. When the sun enters He writes the Nile starts its rise, and every day the Egyptian officials take measurements. Less than 18 cubits rise is a disaster, and the Sultan will not levy taxes on the peasants. So again, look at this consideration here. Yeah, the Sultan here means the Imam. Yes, okay. Is no other, is that, that's not another Sultan is in because he's the king there at the time. So he's a Caliph Imam. So more than 18 brings rejoicing and happiness, and harvest sufficient to store for lean years. The normal pattern, Nasir recounts, is 40 days of rising, 40 days of stable settling, and then another 40 days of decreasing. As the Nile retreats, leaving a new layer of natural fertilizer all over the land, the people quickly plant new crops, following the speed and course of the river's path. Canals and dikes are built all over the country. With so many water wheels, it would be difficult to count them. The Sultan's Canal is a grand piece of engineering linking old Cairo, founded by the Arab conquerors in the 7th century, around the army town of Fustat, with New Cairo, the Al Qahira, founded by the Fatimid conquerors of the 10th century. Fustat, by the way, is still there in Cairo. It is a walled part of the old Cairo. Speaking Arabic and Persian, Nasir and I would have heightened awareness that the word opening itself, Fatha, yeah, opening chapter of the Quran, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Fatah carries other layers of meaning, such as conquest, victories, but perhaps most importantly, in the name of a surah in the Quran, whose opening was relates victory as the sign of God's pardon for Prophet Muhammad's sins. Right? But today we are going to watch the opening of the canal by the Fatimid Sultan, Imam Mustansir Billah alayhi salam. Actually, I wish that 3 days earlier I had accompanied Nasser to see the hoopla of preparations in the Sultan's stables, to hear drummers and trumpeters making as much noise as they could to prepare thousands of horses for the enormous din of the parade. When a din it would, what a din it would be. Din as in not in, din as in the noise, huh? Not this in is the mazhab. But even with such preparation and even with riders to count them, Nasir points out that over 10,000 horses each had a man hired to hold the reins and walk the horse. When all riders and marchers are ready, Sultan Mustansir mounts his camel with the plainest saddle and bridle, with no gold or silver ornamentation. Look at the humility now. Huh? Look at the humility. I would see, as Nasir does, that the Sultan is a well-built, clean-shaven youth with cropped hair, and his pure white Arab-style shirt is tucked into a kamarband of the costliest fabric with a turban to match. No one rides next to the Sultan except the parasol bearer, who in contrast wears extremely ornate dress with a bejeweled gold turban and carries the royal gem-studded parasol, a sign of royalty like a crown. I would have liked to study the intricacies of the embroidery and marvel at the jewel-studded ornamentation, and I would have liked to have been able to add more description to the stately procession. Interesting, isn't it? That the Sultan, or the king, if you want to call him, is modestly dressed, but the people around him are with royal regalia, isn't it, really? In my wish, Nasir Khusrau and I will march with a contingent of intellectual scholars, poets, literati, and experts on law and jurisprudence, all of us on fixed stipends, he is proud to say about Mustansir Billah's policies. But we are far behind the ranks of soldiers and political dignitaries and contingents of princes and their mothers from far and wide. And this only is a procession for opening the canal to let the flooded, the rising of the river for, agriculture. Obviously, unfortunately, this doesn't happen now. Uh, Obviously, because it's become a concrete jungle, isn't it? Really, but back in the day, this used to be an every yearly thing, occasion that happened. Um, what I find is that throughout the Fatimid Caliphate, so much importance was given to education, to uplifting the lives of the ordinary people, and so much effort was put. That we have, for example, the Darul Hikmah, which is used to be a specialized study group uh, uh, behind closed doors, not necessarily at the Azhar University, in the private chambers of the Imam of the time. And some of these sessions were actually led by the Imams themselves. Like you all know about Daimul Islam. So Daimul Islam is written by Qadi al-Nu'man, who is present for 4 Imams. So he comes into the service of Imam Moiz Ledinillah and then goes all the way to Imam Hakim alayhi salam. Uh, and obviously was given a lot of freedom in education, etc. All the things that he has done. He's written so many books, like Tawilu Da'im is quite an interesting read, which is the Tawil side of the Daimul Islam. And the Daimul Islam is all about the Sharia rules and regulations. And then we have the majalis of Muhyiddin Shirazi, another Dai. 80 majalises have been written by him. So you can see the proliferation of education. Education was quite critical, very critical for the Fatimid caliphate. Very important, because that was the salvation. Education is the salvation. They spent made huge efforts, not only money-wise, but effort-wise, getting the right teachers, right scholars in place. And to a degree, I find that the nearest thing that comes to that at the moment is the Ismaili Institute in London, which is run by the Aga Khanis. Yeah, and obviously they share the same lineage, but we as Dawoodi Bohras have gone in a slightly different direction, not giving so much importance. In fact, even the present Dai even has, I've heard him say it in one of his majalises, that they should not be, people should not be educated, they should run their shops. I find it quite disturbing, actually, to coming from a leader of that caliber, to be able to say that kind of thing. And yet, when you look at the Aga Khani side, it's completely the opposite. They say, go educate, education, as much education as you can get. And the difficulty for us as the reformist Dawoodi Bohras is that we have lost that lineage, so to speak, because we interesting again. The comparison here I'm going to make is, the Quran tells stories about the prophets. And I mentioned this last time as well, that the people who opposed the prophets were the rich and the influence, the people of influence, and the people who followed the prophets with the poor people. Yeah, we are in a similar situation here. The richness was already with the Kothar, but we were taken out of the scheme. We were thrown out of that by boycott or whatever you want to call it. But we are the poorer people because we didn't have access to any of this information whatsoever. We were left stranded. And it takes a long time to build all that up. Long time. And obviously, the onus, we cannot go back. The time is gone, but we can look forward. And we have to change our mindset to understand and to do something to educate ourselves. This is very critically important for the survival of the true Fatimid followers who are the reformist Dawoodi Bohras. But we must elevate our station. We must elevate, and that can only be done through education. We have to educate ourselves. This is critically important. We have to have these conversations, difficult as they may be, but we have to continue with this education and go level after level. And you know,
oh, I think that's a wonderful place to leave.
Yes, I want
to
to finish
finish the job.